Professor R. Radha is from Hyderabad Central University. She did her MSc Mathematics from University of Hyderabad, MPhil in Applied Mathematics from University of Hyderabad, PhD from Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, CSIR Research Associate in 94-95, joined as a lecturer at Visvesvaraya National Institute of Technology, Nagpur. She joined in University of Hyderabad in July 2004 as a reader, and since 2010, she is in the School of Mathematics and Statistics. She has numerous awards and honors, like she secured CSIR, JRF, and SRF in 1988-93, secured Boy Scout Fellowship in 99-2000, sponsored by DST India. And she has contributed to the institution in various capacities, like she is a member of the local organizing committee of the International Conference of Women Mathematicians in 2010, University of Hyderabad. She is a member of the local organizing committee of the Advanced Instructional School on Mechanics, supported by NBHM, and conducted Department of Mathematics and Statistics at University of Hyderabad during December 2011. She is also a member of the organizing committee of the workshop on recent trends in partial differential equations and applications held during March 2012 at Department of Mathematics and Statistics, University of Hyderabad. A coordinator of the workshop on partial differential equations and mechanics under the Advanced Training in Mathematics Schools programs, which was organized at the JP Institute of Information Technology, Wagnaghat, Himachal Pradesh during June 2013. She has guided 1 PhD and 6 integrated MSc students for final year projects. Her research interest lies in quasi-linear hyperbolic waves. She published 20 papers in reputed journals, which are best in her research area. She discussed weak solutions and their interaction with the shocks and gas dynamic waves. On behalf of Commissioner of Collegiate Education, Government of Andhra Pradesh, and the participants in the FTP program of this mathematics session, I welcome you, ma'am.
As applications of differential calculus, I have taken few topics. The first one is the tracing of curves. The second one is optimization. Third one is geodesics. And fourth one is stability and bifurcation theory. Tracing of curves, whenever we have a relation between x and y, that is let us take that is f of x comma y equal to 0. So how to draw the curve in the xy plane? That is the question now. So there are few guidelines to trace the curve. Whether the curve is symmetric about x-axis or symmetric about y-axis, all those things can be verified. So what is the advantage of seeing the symmetry? Suppose we know that if the curve is symmetric about y-axis, then we can concentrate only for positive values of x. Then automatically as a mirror image through y-axis, we can complete the remaining curve for negative x-axis. Similarly, if the curve is symmetric about x-axis, all these things can be seen with the help of symmetry. So with the help of symmetry, there are few guidelines. One is when x is replaced by minus x, if the equation is not going to be changed, that means f of x comma y is equal to f of minus x comma y, then we say that the curve is symmetric about y-axis. Similarly, if f of x comma y is equal to f of x comma minus y, that means we are replacing y by minus y. That means whatever is the curve above the x-axis will be same as the below the x-axis. Hence, it is symmetric about the x-axis. Similarly, you can take a line y equal to x. When x and y are interchanged, if the relation is not going to be changed, if these conditions happens, then you can draw a line y equal to x. The right side of the line y equal to x, if you draw the curve, you take the image of the curve, the right side of y equal to x will be same as the left side of the line y equal to x. Similarly, when x is replaced by minus y and y is replaced by minus x, you get it is symmetry about the y equal to minus x. This is the first step. It is not always it works, but this is the first step for a few function for few relations to plot the curve. The second step is intersecting points with x-axis and y-axis. Let us see, is there any possibility of determining the points where the curve intersects the x-axis? So that is given by f of x comma equal to 0. So intersecting the x-axis means the y coordinate is 0. That's what we are trying to put f of x comma equal to 0, and f of, similarly, once you put x equal to 0 means the curve is intersecting the y-axis. So f of 0 comma y is equal to 0 will give the all points where the function intersects the y-axis. Once you identify these points, you can, it gives us a little guideline to trace the curve. Now, the next point is step 3, self-intersecting points. That means here we are, to use this concept, I'm assuming that f is a differentiable function. If f is not differentiable, then the following methodology will not work. So what I wanted to tell you is whether the curve is intersecting with itself or not, or it is just a curve. That means if at a point, a curve, there are two branches or one branch. How do we determine? Now f of x comma y equal to 0, differentiate this with respect to x. So df by dx plus df by dy into dy by dx is equal to 0. If df by dx and df by dy both are different from 0, then dy by dx can be written in this form. So that means there is a unique slope at a point x equal to alpha and y equal to beta. So there is a unique slope means the curve is not intersecting with itself at the point x equal to alpha and y equal to beta. Okay, so that is identified when this is not equal to 0 comma 0 vector. Let us assume that when this is the 0 comma 0 vector, in that case what happens, we differentiate this equation once again with respect to x. So that is given by this. Since we have assumed df by dy and df by dx are equal to 0, it's not the assumption. When this is equal to 0 at x equal to alpha comma beta, we are trying to identify what could be the slope of this. If this is equal to 0 from here, we are not able to identify the slope of the curve. So we are trying to investigate the slope of the curve at the point x equal to x comma y is equal to alpha comma beta in the following manner. So differentiating this, you get this equation. Since we have considered the point such that df by dy is equal to 0. So this point disappears, hence we have this equation. So this says that dy by dx is satisfying by a quadratic equation. That means there are possibilities of having two slopes. Let us see, when this is not equal to 0, when this is not equal to 0. So precisely dy by dx can be written as by solving the quadratic equation, you get two slopes with plus or minus sign. So that means at a point there are two slopes. One is with plus sign, the other is another with minus sign. So the two slopes are possible. Now, in what way these slopes are appearing? That let us see. If these are not, that means this term is the discriminant is not equal to 0 and the denominator is not equal to 0, then there exist two slopes and the curve intersects with itself at the point x comma x equal to alpha, y equal to beta. There are two branches at the point x equal to alpha and beta. The second case is, it's a little interesting. If this is equal, this is not equal to 0, but this discriminant is equal to 0, then both the slopes are equal. So that means the curve is not having two slopes, though it is having one slope, but it is different from this case. So what is that nature? If, hello? whenever the discriminant is equal to 0, both slopes are equal. Hence, it turns out the curve looks like this. That means it looks like a cusp. That means it is coming and going in the same similar direction and having the same tangent. The third case is when d square f by dx square is equal to 0. In that case, dy by dx will be 0, one slope, and dy by dx equal to minus 2 fx by fyy. So there are two slopes. Dy by dx is equal to 0 is one slope. That means curve is parallel to the x-axis in this case. And the other slope at that point is non-zero, so it intersects, but at that point you can draw the curve as parallel to the x-axis. The fourth case is when d square f by dy square is 0, but this is not equal to 0. So from here you can see that instead of dy by dx, you can write it as a dx by dy, so that this term disappears. So dx by dy is equal to 0 is the one slope. So dx by dy is equal to 0 tells us that dy by dx is infinity, implies the curve is parallel to y-axis. And the other slope is non-zero, or neither infinity, hence it has some finite slope, so the curve looks like this. I mean, whatever I'm telling, that is only in the neighborhood of x equal to alpha and y equal to beta. So these are the guidelines to identify the to trace the curve. The next one, the last case will be when both are equal to 0, but d square f by dx dy is not equal to 0 at that point. So in that case, the branches, one branch will be parallel to x-axis and another branch is parallel to y-axis at x equal to alpha and y equal to beta. Now, when all these are equal to 0, again, we have to, that means when all these are equal to 0, so quadratic equation does not give any support us in determining the dy by dx. So we continue further that by differentiating 3 times the given equation, we get in this form. So here, while deriving this equation, we have assumed all these derivatives are equal to 0. First order derivatives as well as the second order derivatives are equal to 0. So from this, you can see that dy by dx is satisfied by the cubic equation. Hence, there are 3 slopes, implies the curve looks like it comes once and repeats once and like this. So at this point, you can see that this is one branch of the curve. The second one is this branch. The third one is this branch. So there are 3 slopes. I mean, we can go on like this. The next step is asymptotes. Asymptotes is nothing but a straight line. Asymptote is always a straight line, but for every curve there need not be any asymptotes. So what do I mean by the asymptote? A curve as x tending to 0 or tending to infinity or y tending to infinity, ultimately it behaves like that straight line, or it will be parallel to that straight line. Then we say that that straight line is an asymptote to the given curve. There are I mean, for a given relation, there can be asymptotes or there may not be any asymptotes. For example, I have taken one equation, relation x cube plus y cube minus 3xy equal to 0. So my f turns out to be this. Let us say f of x comma y is equal to f of y comma x. X is replaced by y is replaced by x. So the relation is not going to be changed. Hence, from here we can conclude that it is symmetric about the line y equal to x-axis. Sorry, y equal to x line. Then what we are trying to see is, we see that df by dx is equal to this and df by dy equal to this. So whether df by dx is 0, df by dy equal to 0 at any point, I could see that only at x equal to 0 and y equal to 0, df by dx and df by dy are 0. So except at x equal to 0, y equal to 0, the curve has only one slope at other points other than origin. So at origin, we don't know what is going to happen. Let us visualize. Since df by dx and df by dy both are equal to 0 at the origin, we consider the second order derivatives, and the second order derivatives gives the equation dy by dx turns out to be this point. Right, the slopes will be at x equal to 0, y equal to 0, we get dy by dx is 0 is one slope, and the other slope is dx by dy is equal to 0. That you can see that d square f by dx square and d square f by dy square both are equal to 0 at the origin, hence it falls in the fifth category, case 5. So dy by dx and dx by dy are equal to 0 implies at the origin the curve should be parallel to x-axis as well as parallel to y-axis. Implies one branch is parallel to x-axis and the other branch is parallel to y-axis. Now we see that there are any asymptotes. Yeah, to look for the asymptote, I have just tried to analyze whether how do we identify the asymptotes. So y equal to mx plus c. That means what I'm trying to say is ultimately it behaves like a y equal to mx plus c form. Let us see what happens to this. So after substituting in the given equation x cube plus y mx plus c whole cube minus 3x into mx plus c equal to 0, this equation satisfies for all values of x when m equal to -1 and c equal to -1. So y equal to minus x minus 1, hence asymptote is x plus y plus 1 is equal to 0. So now the curve looks ultimately as x tends to infinity, y tends to infinity. This is the line x plus y plus 1 equal to 0. So the curve will becomes, it will be parallel to the line x plus y plus 1 equal to 0. And at the point, at the origin, it has one branch is parallel to x-axis and the other branch is parallel to y-axis. And in tracing this curves, we can see where the curve becomes the maximum or minimum also. So that point is very, I thought that it is already you people are using it, hence I did not consider that point. By taking the slopes, a maxima and minima, you can see where the curve becomes parallel to the x-axis and whether it is a point of minimum or point of maximum by looking at the second order derivatives. But all these things are possible only when f is differentiable once or two times depending on the. Now this as a second application I have taken the optimization. So before discussing the optimization theory, I would like to say that if I consider C1 of A comma B is set of all continuously differentiable functions and R is the real set. So for each element in C1 of A comma B, each function is mapped to a real number. How is it possible? How a function can be mapped to a real number? In fact, if that mapping is known as a functional. So how is it possible? If you give me a function y of x, maybe y of x can be mapped to maximum of y of x. But if it exists, or y value at x equal to a. There are so many ways one can define the functions. Functions are mapped to a real number set. Okay, as an example, I have taken I of y is equal to integral a to b 2 pi y into under root 1 plus y dash square dx. So what it does, yeah, here I should mention that, already have mentioned, y of a is equal to a and y of b equal to b. So you take a curve in the xy plane, you take 2 points, small a comma capital A, small b comma capital B, draw a curve, now rotate it around the x-axis. When you rotate it around the x-axis, you can see the solid. So the surface of that solid is given by the surface area of revolution. And now the question is, for what could be the curve? What could be the curve? So that my I of y is the maximum. I of y is a real number. Please see. I is mapping from C1 of A comma B to R. So since I of y is a real number, we can talk about the maximum or minimum of I of y. So here also the calculus plays a role. The second example is, here I forgot to mention, I of y is equal to, it is nothing but the area of the, you take a closed curve, what is the area lies inside that closed curve? That is given by I of y. But here I forgot to write, subject to one condition. What is that condition? The length of, length of the curve is fixed. That means you take a thread of fixed length L, you close it, you join both the ends so that it becomes a closed curve. Now the area contained in that closed curve is given by I of y. So subject to that condition, the length of the curve, or perimeter of the curve is fixed. By fixed, with fixed perimeters, we can have the different regions. For each region, you can calculate the area and see which one gives the maximum value. Right. So the same thing can be put it in the another form. If in the parametric form, if the closed curve is taken x equal to x of t, y equal to y of t, then subject to the condition x of t naught plus t equal to x of t, that means it is repeating, so it is closed one. So this equation I of y can be written in this form, subject to the curve is fixed. This is another interesting problem. Now we'll answer these questions. So what is the maximum surface area of revolution, or for which curve the surface area of revolution will be maximum, for which curve, what is the shape of the curve, so that I of y will be the giving the maximum area enclosed by that closed curve. Another problem is interesting, Brachistochrone problem. So this problem is something, suppose a bead is dropped at the point origin, say, and it should reach to the point x equal to a, maybe at any level. The y of a equal. So now we have fixed 2 points. One is 0, 0. The other point is a, capital A. Now the question is, what should be that bead should take path, what kind of path it should take, so that it reaches this point with minimum time. That is the important thing. So for the bead can travel along this path, the bead can travel along this path, bead can travel along this path. So for each path, while traveling when bead is traveling, you calculate the time taken by the bead to reach from this point to this point, and see what is for which curve it gives the, what is the corresponding path, it gives the minimum time. Okay, for this we use a little physics. You take, if the bead is at any position, the kinetic energy plus potential energy remains constant. Kinetic energy is of mv square and plus mgy, y is the height of this, so plus mgy turns out to be constant. So what is v? V is the velocity of the bead. So how do we calculate the bead? If it is traveling along this curve, so along this curve, in a unit time, how much distance it is traveling, that is the speed. So the v is given by ds by dt, where s is the arc length. if ds by dt, from here ds by dt can be written in terms of y. So dt by ds is equal to a reciprocal of this. So integrating on both sides, you get this equation. Hence, t is equal to, t is given, the time is given in terms of arc length. But we have the relation between arc length and the space coordinates. So ds by dx into dx, hence this turns out to be a functional. Right? So we have seen some few functionals. One is a Brachistochrone problem, and the other one is the area of region bounded by a closed curve, and the third one is a surface area of revolution. So in these three problems, our aim is what is the curve? I mean, what is the curve? It satisfies the, whether it takes the maximum or minimum. Okay. So I'm posing the problem as I of y is integral a to b, a function of x, y, and y dash dx. So I'm passing through the points a comma a and b comma b. Fine. So let us assume it takes the maximum attains when y equal to 5. Maximum attains, it could be maximum or minimum, sorry, extremum attains at y equal to 5. So when I disturb, that means instead of y equal to 5, I take some other curve. How do I define y equal to 5 plus epsilon into psi? Here epsilon is a parameter. But what is the guiding principle? The whatever function we are taking, that function should satisfy this condition. So y of a equal to a, but already we know that phi is the extremum. That means phi satisfies these two conditions. Hence, whenever we are considering y, satisfying by this condition implies psi of a should be equal to 0, psi of b should be equal to 0. So now, if this I turns out to be, I is depending on the epsilon that you are choosing. So it becomes a real value function now, right? So di by to find the extremum, di by d epsilon is equal to 0. So from here you see that d integral a to b f phi into epsilon psi plus f phi dash epsilon psi dash dx is equal to 0. Right? Here we use the integration by parts. So what is the integration by parts? It says it gives that phi epsilon dash epsilon psi minus derivative of this term. Since epsilon is a parameter, the derivative of this term comes here. So because psi of a is 0, psi of b is 0, the first term turns out to be 0. Hence, now the here psi is an arbitrary function. Arbitrary in the sense, psi is any arbitrary function, but satisfying the condition is psi of a equal to psi of b equal to 0. Since this is equal to 0 for any psi, implies the integrand has to be equal to 0. So this is the Euler's equation in order to determine the extremals. If at all, if you know a functional, the extremals are satisfying by this condition. So in the first problem, our f is equal to y into under root 1 plus y dash square. Second case, in Euler's equation, you can see that maximum surface area of revolution is obtained when the curve is rotated by like a sphere. So the surface should be a sphere. It gives the maximum surface area. And the second example is closing the, if you have a closed curve, so what should be the shape of the curve so that it encloses the maximum area? That is nothing but a circle. The third one, the third one is the Brachistochrone problem. It is nothing but circloids. So those things, three things can be verified by solving the equation for corresponding f. In Brachistochrone problem, f turns out to be this and so on. the application, as the application of differential calculus, we have a Green's theorem. So what is the Green's theorem says is a line integral can be converted to surface integral. But here the Green's theorem, the curve is lying on the xy plane. So once you have a closed curve C, so the area is given by R. So integral P dx plus Q dy, here P and Q are assumed as a differentiable functions, then this integral is precisely same as d phi by dx dq by dx minus dp by dy integration over the region R. So many times it is useful to apply Green's theorem. If the time permits, I'll take the applications. The next one is an extension of the Green's theorem. What is the extension? In the Green's theorem, this curve is lying on the xy plane, z equal to 0. But whereas in Stokes' theorem, the curve, consider the surface in R3, like you can talk about the cylinder, or you take any surface. You take any surface. The moment you say a surface in the R3, so bounded surface, you can see the boundary of that surface. That boundary of the surface is known as C. This C, so if F is a vector, when that vector is integrated along the curve, that is given by F dot dr. This integral value is same as the surface integral curl F dot n cap. Here n cap, the moment you say the surface, you know the what is the outward normal. So this n cap is unit outward normal to S. The third application is Gauss divergence theorem. Yeah. So here, if C lies in R2, then if Stokes' theorem reduces to Green's theorem. Gauss divergence theorem. Again, now you consider a volume. The F is a vector defined over that volume V. So divergence of F integrated over the what volume V is same as integrated over surface S F dot n ds. So these three are the applications. These three are mostly used in deriving the governing equations in fluid dynamics. So if time permits, I will take that. The stability. The next one is the stability. So first I will explain what do I mean by the stability. If I take the example dx by dt equal to minus x, right? So right hand side t is not appearing. So the independent variable, if it doesn't appear in the right hand side, we call that as the autonomous system, right? So to this, if you solve it as an initial value problem, x of t naught equal to x naught, then the solution turns out to be x equal to x naught into e power minus t minus t. So it is just observation as t tends to infinity, x is tending to 0. If x, why is it happening? If x is positive, then dx by dt is negative, hence x is decreasing. If x is negative, dx by dt is positive, then x is increasing. So what it tells, whether we know the solution or not, ultimately as t tends to infinity, we are able to guess whether the x value is approaching to some known value. The answer is, in this case, x is approaching to 0 as t tends to infinity. The behavior of the function x is identified. Similarly, if I take dx by dt equal to x, x of t naught is equal to x naught. So the solution turns out to be, here x is approaching to 0, but as t tends to minus infinity. So these two are different. So what is this ultimate point? In fact, That is nothing but the x equal to 0 is a solution to this equation as well as this equation. Solutions to the means they are point solutions. They are stationary solutions. If the initial condition x of t naught is equal to 0, then there is no, it remains to be in that position only. So now we'll see little further. Dx by dt equal to f of x. Here these two are very simple things, hence immediately we could identify x is tending to 0 as a t tends to infinity or t tends to minus infinity. Let us consider a little complicated function dx by dt equal to f of x, x of t naught equal to x naught. What is the behavior of this as t tends to infinity? Naturally, it should depend on x naught. Why? If you look at the f of x, the graph of f of x, if it intersects the x-axis, there need not be. F of x can remain positive. It need not intersect the x-axis when you draw the curve y equal to f of x. So f of x need not take 0 values at all. But if it takes those points at the points where f takes 0 value is known as, they are known as critical points. So we'll say the critical points. In this example, the critical point is 0. In this example also critical point is 0. Now in this case, let us assume there are several critical points. X1 is one critical point, X2 is another critical point, X3 is the third critical point, X4 is the fourth critical point, and maybe there can be some more critical points. Now, I would like to see if my x naught initial, for any x naught, this should have a solution. So let us take x naught belongs to in the interval x1 to x2. In the interval x1 to x2, if my x naught lies, then what happens? At f of x naught value is negative, because in the interval x1 to x2, f of x is negative. So since x naught lies in this, f of x naught is negative. So what happens to dx by dt? Dx by dt is negative, implies x value is decreasing. Decreasing from where? Decreasing from x naught. So once it decreases from x naught, that means it is moving in this direction. So if my x naught lies in this interval, whatever x naught we consider, as x tends to infinity, as t tends to infinity, x value cannot move the right side of x naught. That is the observation that made from this graph, right? So if x naught is in this interval, then as t tends to infinity, x is approaching to x1, which is a critical point. Okay, fine. Now the second interval x2 to x3. In the interval x2 to x3, if my x naught lies, in this interval, the f of x is positive as per my graph only. I'm not giving I have not taken any function, but if the function is satisfying by the showing this graph, in this interval, what is my f of x is positive. So at t equal to 0, t naught, x naught, f of x naught is also positive. Implies dx by dt becomes positive. Implies x is increasing. So increasing from where? Increasing from x naught. So as t increases from t naught, x is increasing from x naught to which point? That we see. But certainly it cannot reach to x2. So now what I wanted to say is, this point x2 In the neighborhood of x2, if I take my initial condition at t equal to t naught, my x equal to x naught, then it is moving away from x equal to x2. At any point of time t, x will not approach x2. X of t will not convert merge with x2. That's all trying to say. So yeah, that is one observation. Here it is approaching to x1, whereas in this case x is not approaching to x2. Then where it goes? It is moving away from x2. Fine. Then at x equal to x3, again f of x3 is equal to 0. So once it reaches x3, it becomes a stationary point. So the solution with the initial condition x of t naught is equal to x naught lying in the interval x2 to x3 becomes it is moving away from x2 and approaching to x3. What about the interval x3 to x4? In this interval, again the function is negative. So x is decreasing from x naught. Where is my x naught? X naught is in this interval. So x is decreasing means it is moving towards left side of x naught, implies it is approaching to x naught. So in this case, you can see that some critical points are behaving one way, and so I mean critical points are not behaving, but the behavior of the solutions in the neighborhood of the critical point. So what it is in the neighborhood of the critical point x1, the point all paths, all curves, all position vectors, if the position is at x equal to at t equal to t naught, x equal to x naught, it is attracting. So all value, all paths, that means all x of t, if x of t lies in the interval x1 to x2, it is attracting. All are merging with x1 as t tends to infinity. If they are merging, then we say that it is a stable critical point. It is I'm defining very loosely, but later I'll define what is stable critical point. Whereas if the behavior of the solutions in the neighborhood of x equal to x2, however close the x naught is close to x2, however close it is, but x value will be moving away from x2, implies it is repelling, it is throwing out. So all paths are moving away from x equal to x2. Then we say that it is unstable. Now from this graph, you can see that x1 is a stable critical point, x2 is unstable, x3 is stable, and x4 is again unstable because it is moving, all paths are moving away from x equal to x4 as t tends to infinity. That is important, as t tends to infinity. So yes, okay. Before coming to the stability, I will state one theorem. Suppose dx by dt equal to f of x and dx by dt equal to ax. I am considering two differential equations. The behavior of these two different, the difference is here it is a non-linear differential equation, whereas this is a linear differential equation. What is my a? A is equal to f dash of 0. And f of 0 is equal to 0. Now this f of x is satisfying by this condition, limit f of x minus ax by x as x tends to 0 is 0. When these conditions satisfy, the behavior of these two solutions remains same in the neighborhood of x equal to 0. That's all I'm trying to say. So what is my aim? F of 0 is equal to 0 means I'm trying to consider the critical point 0. The x equal to 0 is my critical point. So now I would like to see, when here the function is a known or well behaved function, so we could identify at what, whether it is a critical point is stable or unstable and so on. But in general, what is the situation? In general, the situation is, for linear case, based on the linear case, we can conclude the behavior of the nonlinear case. How is it possible? So if x equal to 0 is the critical point, satisfying by these three properties, then the behavior of the critical point, that means whether it is stable or unstable, is identified by the linear case, dx by dt equal to ax. So for that, I define f of x equal to f of x minus a into x. For time being, I am assuming a to be negative. A to be negative. Similarly, one can do it a to be positive, because a is the constant f dash of 0. Either it takes a positive value or negative value. If it is taking 0 value, then I'm not going to discuss. Fine. At present, I'm not going to discuss. So this f of x is equal to f of x, capital F of x is small f of x minus a into x. So that my dx by dt becomes ax plus f, capital F of x. Now I'm trying to solve this equation. How is it possible? Let us multiply by e power minus at, so that this equation becomes like this, and these two terms can be clubbed as a ddt of x into e power minus at, which is equal to e power minus at into f of x. Hence, we write x is equal to this. Now, further, it can be simplified as x equal to x naught into e power a t minus t naught plus this. Right? If capital F is equal to 0, that means f of x equal to ax. The solution of this reduces to the known form. X equal to x naught into e power a into t minus t. Now, I'm trying to see the nature of x. If I look at the mod x, which is less than or equal to mod x naught e power a into t minus t naught. I have not used the modulus sign for this, because exponential function is a positive function, and e power a into this less than or equal to. Now, what is my f? My f is satisfying by this condition. Limit of capital F of x by x, limit of capital F of x by x is equal to 0. That means for small values of x, there exists some beta, such that this capital F is less than, behaves like beta into x. Here beta is greater than 0. So I mean, here there are two conditions. I'm defining mod x. I mean, for small values of x, that means I have a control over x. Once I fix the x value, what is the neighborhood of for x? So once the neighborhood is fixed, the beta can be fixed. So for this beta value is depending on the neighborhood of x that we choose. So whenever mod x is less than delta, there exists beta such that f is less than or equal to beta into x. So here beta is the constant and is a positive constant. Hence, this turns out to be, using the Gromwall's inequality, one can write mod x is less than or equal to mod x naught into e power a plus beta t minus t. Now the beauty comes here. What is the behavior of the critical point in the neighborhood of x equal to 0? So if x naught is in the neighborhood of x equal to 0, right? Suppose this is the point x equal to 0. Now my x naught is here. I have a control over the distance between 0 to x naught. That means the mod of x naught is I'm having a control. If my x naught is small enough, then if my x naught is small enough, the x value will remain small. X value means this x should be remain small for all values of time greater than t equal to t naught. So at t equal to t naught, if the particle reaches here, for higher values of t greater than t naught, x value should be approaching to a 0. Then I say that it is stable. If it is far away from critical point, I'm not going to say anything. When I'm going to say it is stable, when a point is said to be stable, if I'm in the neighborhood of it, if I remains to be in the same neighborhood, then I say that I'm stable. If I'm moving away in all different directions, I won't say that I'm a stable person, right? In a similar way, this x naught is up, if it is x naught is approaching to say 0. So when is it possible? If a plus beta is negative. If a plus beta is negative, if a I don't want to do okay. If a plus beta is positive, then x okay, since I said that a is negative, I'll talk about it. Now this beta value will be 0 for linear case. So in linear case, as a t tends to infinity and a is negative, mod x is tending to 0. Mod x is less than or equal to 0 means x is tending to 0. That is the behavior of the linear case. dx by dt equal to a into x when a is negative. Now, what is the behavior of nonlinear case? Nonlinear case is given by mod x is less than or equal to mod x naught. Now, what about beta? Beta is under my control. In what sense? The moment I fix x naught, beta is fixed, right? If my mod x naught is less than delta, the beta value is depending on delta. So I can choose delta to be small enough so that my beta will be small in such a way that a plus beta is negative. So once a plus beta is negative, what it says, mod x is less than or equal to 0 as t tends to infinity because of the negative coefficient in the exponential, implies x is tending to 0 as t tends to infinity. What is the behavior of linear case? When a is negative, x is tending to 0 as t tends to infinity. Similar behavior you can see for nonlinear case. Then what about when a is positive? When a is positive, this equation, this equation can be written as in place of t, I'll replace it by minus t. That means I'll use the another variable s equal to minus t. So dx by ds is equal to minus f of s. Hence a equal to minus f dash of 0. So in the previously a was positive, now a becomes negative. So same thing works. So if a is positive, it is moving away from the origin in the linear case. Similar behavior you can see for in the nonlinear case, for the nonlinear problem. So in this way, we can use the stability theory for looking at the behavior of the nonlinear equations as t tends to infinity. Now I'll state the asymptotically stable. So what do I mean by the asymptotically stable? At point now x equal to 0, x equal to, say this is the critical point. Now, if my x naught lies in this interval, if my x naught lies in this interval other than 0, then I can find epsilon such that the curve x of t takes values in this interval for all values of t. Then I say that it is the stable critical point. What is this? This point is the critical point. So wherever x naught is lying in this interval, that means we are able to identify the bound for x naught. If x naught lies between minus delta 2 plus delta, then x lies between minus epsilon 2 plus epsilon. So that means my x is bounded by 2 epsilon. Hence, in that case, we say that it is a stable critical point. What is asymptotically stable? If as t tends to infinity, if x is approaching to the critical point, then we say that it is asymptotically stable critical point. If these two cases fails, then we say that it is an unstable critical point. Fine. As a continuation of the stability, first we have taken the linear equations and saw the stability. Then non-linear equation. If when you linearize it, the coefficient is either positive or negative. Again, we could analyze the stability of the non-linear equation. Now we are considering a differential equation where involving a parameter. F of x comma delta. Delta is a parameter. It is just like x minus delta. So if my delta is equal to 0, x equal to 0 is the critical point. If delta is equal to 1, x equal to 1 is the critical point. And so the moment you give the delta value, the critical point is identified. So in the x delta plane, it represents the curve. So f of x comma delta is equal to 0 gives a curve. Each point on the curve is a critical point to the differential equation dx by dt equal to f of x comma delta. Is it clear? So previously we have seen only one critical point, or we are discussing, the critical points are fixed. Now here, if I assume that f is analytic with respect to x and delta, there are infinitely many critical points. So f of x comma delta is equal to 0 gives a curve. On a curve, each point is a critical point. That means this equation has infinitely many critical points. At each critical point, using the above theory, we can discuss about whether the critical point is stable or unstable. Is it asymptotically stable or asymptotically unstable? In fact, if it is not stable, you can call it as an unstable point, right? So how do we do it? For this, again, we look for the linearized system. This is the non-linear equation, and this is the dx by dt fx at x equal to mu comma mu of delta gives the critical points. When they are evaluated at x in fx, you get the linear part. So this is the linear differential equation. So now fx value is depending on delta alone. So for some values of delta, it can be positive. For some values of delta, it can be negative. For all values of delta, if it is positive, that means if fx value is not changing its sign with respect to delta, then dx by dt is always the coefficient is positive, so it behaves like x equal to x naught into e power a into t minus t, where T naught. So where A is nothing but Fx, which is function of delta. So for no value of delta, the function is Fx is changing its sign. Fx evaluated on the critical point curve. So in that case, the stability is not going to be changed. If it is positive, it remains to be positive. That means all critical points on that curve are unstable. If all critical points having the sign Fx value is negative, then all critical points are stable critical points. In fact, they are asymptotically stable. So there is nothing to discuss. Then what is there? For some values of delta, Fx takes positive value, and for some values of delta, it takes the negative value. That means there exists a delta equal to delta naught such that in the neighborhood of delta equal to delta naught, Fx takes positive values as well as the negative values. As delta less than delta naught, delta greater than delta naught. Okay, so that means one side of when delta is less than delta naught, if the constant Fx is negative, when delta is greater than delta naught, Fx is positive. Implies if Fx is negative, then they are unstable. Fx is negative, they are stable critical points. When Fx is positive, they are unstable critical points. See, now we have the continuous critical points, but up to certain stage, the critical points are stable or asymptotically stable. Once it crosses one point delta equal to delta naught, it becomes unstable. So that point is known as bifurcation point. It bifurcates stable region, unstable region. So it is like a threshold. I mean, when you have a spring, if you apply the force up to certain force, it comes back. It comes back. It restores its energy. But if it exceeds certain energy, then it can break also, or it can elongate. So that means that the behavior is altogether different. That point is the threshold value for the applied force. So similarly here also, for delta value has up to certain levels, up to for some values of delta it takes the positive, the Fx value is positive when delta is less than delta naught. And so in that case, that means one side of the curve at delta equal to delta naught, it is stable, and the other side is unstable. So then what do we say? Here, what is my lambda? Lambda is Fx. So if it is positive, then all the critical points are unstable. If lambda, which is equal to Fx of Fx is negative, then all these critical points are asymptotically stable. Now, what is the bifurcation point? Delta equal to delta naught. When delta equal to delta naught, mu is equal to mu naught. Now we have to see in what way, how can the critical points are given by f of x comma delta is equal to 0. As we have learned in the beginning of the talk, trace the curves. If I'm trying to plot the curve f of x comma delta equal to 0, I apply different rules, symmetry, intersecting point, intersecting with the delta axis, intersecting with the x-axis, and so on. So I have observed that at delta equal to delta naught, whether there is only one branch, that means like here at this point, only one branch of the curve consisting of the critical points, then it is known as a saddle node bifurcation. What is a saddle node bifurcation? At the bifurcation point, there is only one branch of the critical points. One side of the branch will be stable, the other side of the branch will be unstable. then we say that saddle node bifurcation. Now let us see, there could be two branches as we have seen earlier. So those two branches, delta equal to delta naught, those two branches, let us assume that these two are the branches. At one branch it is positive, and at the another side of the branch will be negative, and similarly vice versa. That means along this branch stability changes. Here it is unstable, here it is stable, whereas here it is unstable and here it is stable. So across the critical point, bifurcation point, stability changes along both the branches, implies that kind of bifurcation is known as transcritical bifurcation. Transcritical bifurcation. Again, now there are, if we have the two branches at delta equal to delta naught, but along one branch there is a change in the stability. Stability changes, but along the other branch there is no change. Then we call this as pitchfork bifurcation. Though I have not given the theorem, but I'm trying to explain with the help of one example. Dx by dt equal to x into delta minus x square, x minus delta plus 2. Now what are the critical points? This right hand side should be equal to 0. Right hand side is equal to 0 means the first factor is 0. So x equal to 0. That means my mu of delta is equal to 0. So mu of delta is equal to 0 means the entire delta axis is the, every point on the delta axis is a critical point. And second kind of critical point, x square equal to delta. So x square equal to delta means, because this turns with 0, so if you give me one delta value, you take the x value plus or minus root delta, that will give the critical point. Similarly, x equal to delta minus 2. So these three are the critical points. That means that this curve can be plotted as delta mu is equal to 0, mu square equal to delta, mu square is equal to delta. Delta is always positive, mu square, because delta equal to mu square, hence it behaves like a parabola. And the third one is mu equal to delta minus 2. Mu equal to delta minus 2. This is the line. So now we have one curve, second curve, third curve. At this point, there are two branches. At this point, two branches. At this point, at this point. So these four are the, at these 4 points, we have two branches, right? Now let us see what is my linearized case. If I define capital X equal to small x minus mu, then x dash becomes this plus non-linear term. Plus non-linear terms, I'm ignoring it because I have already proved that the nature of the critical point is behaving like is identified from the linearized case. So now this is my linear equation, x dash is equal to this into. So when mu equal to 0, that means I'm considering the critical points on the line delta axis. So x dash is equal to delta into 2 minus delta x. So you take any value on this x delta axis, right? When delta is negative, this is negative, 2 minus delta is positive, hence this remains negative, hence all these critical points are stable critical points. Now let us come back to delta is less than 0 is over. When delta is positive, that means delta lies between 0 and 2. When delta lies between 0 and 2, this delta is positive, 2 minus delta is negative. Right? 2 minus delta is also positive. Hence, this entire thing is positive. Hence, all these critical points are unstable. What happens at this point? When delta equal to 0, this is equal to 0. Implies it changes its stability. At this point, the stability, the constant turns out to be 0. I don't know whether it is stable or unstable. I'm not able to conclude anything. Where I can conclude, when delta is less than 0, I could conclude. When delta is greater than 0 but less than 2, I could conclude. When delta is strictly greater than 2, so when delta is strictly greater than 2, this is positive, this is positive, sorry, this is negative, delta is positive, so this whole thing is negative, hence these are the stable critical points. Right, now again, look at delta equal to 2. At delta equal to 2, this constant is 0, hence we are not in position to conclude whether this is a stable critical point or unstable critical point. But what we can say, the delta equal to 0, delta equal to 2 are the two bifurcation points. They are bifurcation points, but about those points, I'm not going to say anything. Now, next, the other branch of the, at delta equal to 0, there is one more branch of the critical points that is given by delta equal to mu square. So this becomes like x dash, the coefficient of x becomes like this. Now, when mu is greater than 0, mu is less than 0, but in the neighborhood of 0. That means mu is varying from -1 to +2. When mu is varying from -1 to +2, this value is always negative. When mu is greater than -1, this becomes positive, and because of this term, it is negative. When mu is less than 2, again, this is less than 0, negative, hence all the critical points are stable criticals. Please see, in the neighborhood of delta equal to 0, there is no change of stability. There is no change of stability. But at delta equal to 0, we don't know, because it is a bifurcation point. So it falls in the third case, which is known as the pitchfork bifurcation. Pitchfork bifurcation. Please wait, it is getting downloaded. Yes, a pitchfork bifurcation. Along this path, there is a change of stability. Along this path, there is no change of stability across delta equal to delta naught. Now, similarly, you can see that along the line delta equal to mu plus 2, there is a change of stability along both the branches. Hence, this point 1 comma -1, delta equal to 1 is the bifurcation point, and it is a transcritical bifurcation point. Delta equal to 2 also a transcritical bifurcation point. Delta equal to 4 is also transcritical bifurcation point. So in this way, we can conclude that the bifurcation point, whether it falls in the first category of the saddle node or pitchfork or transcritical bifurcation points. Now, there is one more case, that is half bifurcation, that I'm not taking into the PQ, I'm not considering it. As an application of the governing equations in fluid dynamics, what we do is, if I consider a volume V, this is the volume V, the fluid is moving through the surface through this volume. What is the conservation of mass says? Conservation of mass in fluids, one law is satisfied, that is the conservation of mass. That means if in this fixed region, in the region V, the rate of change of the mass is balanced by the outgoing flux. So what is the mass contained in this? If I take in the small volume element, this is the volume V, in the small volume element, volume into density gives the mass, rho into dV. Rho is the density, dV is the small volume element. So in a small volume element, mass is calculated as rho into d. In the entire, so what is the total volume? The total, the total mass is given by m into, triple integral over v rho dv. This is my region V. Right? The rate of change of this. So if I call this as m, dm by dt. So in this region, mass keep changing with respect to time t. Mass can change, but that means either mass can increase or mass can decrease. Increase means there is inflow is more than the outflow. Decrease means inflow is less than the outflow. So this has to be balanced by how much fluid is going through the surface. So that is the fluid velocity dot n. This much fluid is going, the mass ds double integral. Yes. But outgoing, here n cap is the outgoing normal, but here mass is measured inside the volume V. Hence, these two are balanced by taking the negative sign. Sorry, yeah, okay. This is the flux across the. So what is the conservation of mass? Dm by dt is equated by this. So triple integral V d rho by dt plus double integral over S rho u dot n cap ds is equal to 0. This is true for any arbitrary volume V, but it has to be fixed. Once volume is fixed, surface is fixed, this is the conservation of mass. So now here we have the surface integral, here we have the volume integral. I would like to convert them over a volume integral V d rho by dt plus, at the beginning I have mentioned what surface integrals can be converted as the volume integrals with the help of Gauss divergence theorem. Divergence of rho dv is equal to 0, which is equal to triple integral over v d rho by dt. Rho is the density, divergence of rho velocity vector, whole thing dv is equal to 0. Is there any restriction on the volume? No. So since v is arbitrary, the integrand has to be equal to 0. So d rho by dt plus divergence of rho v vector is equal to 0. This is the governing equation as a conservation of mass. This is also known as equation of continuity. Now, while deriving the governing equations, we have one more law, that is conservation of momentum. So, whenever there is a change in the momentum, that means mass into velocity. Momentum is defined by mass into velocity. Whenever there is a change in the momentum, that means there are some applied forces. Unless applied forces are there, there won't be any change of momentum. That is a Newton's law. So using that, the momentum, mass into velocity, rho v dv, right? Mass into velocity over this is equal to the applied forces. Here there are two kinds of applied forces. One is the body force and the other one is the surface force. So if I ignore the body forces, when it is not required, we can, hello? it is not required to ignore the body forces, but for simplicity, I'm ignoring the body forces. So it becomes d sigma 1 by dx1, d sigma xx by dx plus d sigma xy by dy plus d sigma xz by dz ds. N cap here n1, n2, n3 are there. Now here I have not explained properly what is that, what are sigma xx, sigma xy and sigma xz. They are nothing but the stress components. So I'll just trying to explain what is the stress. So when a force is applied at a point, the resultant will be varying from resultant will be defined by across the surface. First, we have to identify the surface on which surface the force is applied. So this force acting on that surface will give us the resultant force. So the T vector that is known as the tensor, if the surface is considered as whose normal is given by n cap, then we write this as T1 I cap plus T2 j cap plus T3 k cap. So these are identified by, so I mean, this can be written as sigma xx, sigma xy, sigma xz, sigma sigma yx, sigma yy, sigma yz, sigma zx, sigma zy, sigma zz into n1, n2, n3, I cap. So this is known as the stress matrix. Stress matrix. So this again, using the Gauss divergence theorem, we can derive the equation in the volume over the volume integral over the volume. Hence, we can derive the equation of momentum, like that. Conservation of energy. Next, conservation of angular momentum. Conservation of angular momentum says that this matrix is symmetric. So with the help of this differential calculus, we derive the all governing equations involved in the fluid motions. So in this way, once we derive these equations, now our next task is how to solve them. For solving the different, again, we use the differential calculus with the different, solving these equations will be varying from problem to problem. In the sense, since these equations are highly nonlinear, what we do is we assume certain conditions, either fluid is incompressible, or nonlinear terms are negligible, or viscous terms are dominating, or viscous terms are negligible. Like that, depending on that, we try to solve the problem.